What's your name, slave? Spartacus. I think that's a line from the movie. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a movie that I generally don't, generally don't review these kind of movies because I don't like these kind of movies. Just because I'm a huge movie fanatic doesn't mean I love basically all kinds of movies. Now it's very interesting. Many of you guys may not know this, but I really don't like this era. I love silent films. I love movies from the 30s and 40s and 50s. Well, select kind of movies from the 50s, because when we got into the 50s and stuff, in order for the studios to kind of compete with television at the time, they started making these kind of epics, and these kind of epics, and unless it's like Lawrence of Arabia and maybe some others and stuff, I don't really go in for. I'm coming at you to review Spartacus. And the reason I don't review movies, this is probably the first movie of its kind that I've been reviewing on this channel. As I said, the reason why I don't review these movies is because I don't like these movies. I don't watch these movies. These kind of, mid to late 50s, early to mid 60s kind of, just epic movies that are better part of frickin', 3.5 hours long, or in this case 3 hours 16 minutes. These kind of movies don't interest me, and in particular, especially like Roman era movies, I have absolutely no interest in whatsoever. The only reason I got this is because I recently came across it for $3. Never having seen the whole thing, I'm like, you know what? Let's just buy it and see it. It should be said that I regard Stanley Kubrick, of course, as being one of the all-time greatest filmmakers of all time, and he's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. So obviously I knew from a long time ago, or for a while, I knew for years that he did this. But the thing is it's like, well, from what I know about Stanley Kubrick's involvement with this movie, of course, just having done was it Paths of Glory, I think, with Kirk Douglas? That was an actual Stanley Kubrick movie, meaning that it plays like one, it feels like one. So from what I know, or the little I know about the history of Spartacus, is basically Kirk Douglas, I think that he started filming it possibly, and then I don't know whether he started filming it with someone else or not. At some point, from what I know, Kirk Douglas is said to have asked Stanley Kubrick to either finish it or just do the whole thing or whatever. I want to say that it was started without him, and then he was asked to finish it. And obviously, being at the time, I don't think Kubrick was even 30 years old at the time. So what guy wanting to make movies would turn down the opportunity to make something like this? I probably would have, but well, maybe not really. But I mean, this era just completely doesn't interest me at all. So if I did accept the job of doing it, I would have been probably extremely bored. But so in saying that, like, it's basically, it's a Kirk Douglas executive produced movie. So basically it's a Kirk Douglas movie with, more or less from what I can see, having made myself watch the whole thing, Stanley Kubrick just saying, action and cut, basically. Because if you were to just watch this movie without knowing who did it, and knowing Stanley Kubrick's, style and stuff, you'd never know that Stanley Kubrick did it, because out of all his movies, that I've seen, and I think I've seen pretty much everything possibly except his very, 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 very first movie, which incidentally did recently come out on, Blu-ray or whatever. So this movie, out of all of them, just does not feel like a Stanley Kubrick movie. That's why I never owned it until now, of course, or seen it fully until now. I think I rented it on Laserdisc, because I think Criterion back in the 90s did put this out on Laserdisc, and back in the day I could rent Laserdisc from Video Update. I think I did rent this back in the day, but of course I don't know if I even made it 30 minutes into the movie at the time. I just couldn't do it. Of course, this time I've made myself watch the whole thing. It should be said that I did take, like, I think I watched it in at least 3 sittings, because there's no way I could watch this whole thing at once. It's just because the subject matter just doesn't interest me. I regard these kind of, Roman epic movies from the 50s and 60s and stuff as just being just pretentious, just overly it's just the kind of movies, and especially this kind of, late 50s, early 60s Technicolor or whatever the hell it is, there's just so much about this kind of movie that I don't like. So, I I've debated whether or not even reviewing this, because I don't know, it's just to review such a classic movie and just do nothing but kind of just trash it and say I don't like it is probably, I don't know, not gonna, probably people watching this review are probably not going to agree, because they'll probably I don't know. I guess so. I guess it doesn't matter if people watching this review agree or not. So basically, this movie, I'm assuming the story. See, I'm so uninterested about this movie or the story. I think the story of Spartacus was something in probably a novel or something beforehand. So basically, the story is about this, back in Roman times, this slave named Spartacus who, whatever, just so sick of being a slave and being treated badly and stuff, that with the help of other slaves and stuff, at this critical point, they basically revolt. The first, I don't know what, 45 minutes or something maybe takes place at this gladiator training school where the slaves have been picked by this guy to basically train these gladiators to be, slaves to be gladiators, so they can fight for the rich, Roman bastards and shit. Just, it's their sport. Instead of football, they just watch two gladiators fight to the death or whatever. Yay, that sounds like fun. So, so the first, I want to say, like I say, 45 minutes or so of this movie just spends, the time in the gladiator training school of being trained to be gladiators. So in this really cool, well, what the hell am I saying? Really cool. Well, probably one of the coolest parts of the movie is where, these rich, Roman bastards want to just have a gladiatorial fight right at the school, and the guy himself who's heads up this place is like, well, we don't have fights here, it'll be bad morale for the slaves and shit. Like, they could get any lower, like morale could get any lower for a slave than it already is. But so they end up, so of course, because these rich Romans demand it, the guy has to cave in and have a gladiatorial fight at the actual place. Well, it ends up not going so well, where they actually end up, escaping the place because they're ill prepared for, apparently a revolt here or whatever. I don't know how they're able to escape, but whatever. It's a movie, an epic kind of movie. So from the early 60s, I want to say it is from 1960, I think. So Spartacus, or the slaves, with the help of Spartacus, break out of the gladiatorial training school and go on their own, and basically, I don't know, I can't even really remember the mid-section of this movie. It's basically cutting back and forth between the Roman big shot bastards and shit and Spartacus and his followers and shit over the course of the, so basically, for the middle part of the movie is basically Spartacus just meeting he met a woman earlier on in the freaking gladiatorial school, and it was kind of like the same thing that Waterworld would end up doing later on, where she's a slave too, and basically the people who ran the gladiatorial school just pass her around to some of the the better gladiators or what, for just obviously female company, if you know what I mean. And so it's not like, so there's in this really valiant scene with Kirk Douglas as Spartacus, this beautiful woman is offered to him sexually and to do his bidding, and of course obviously doesn't want to, is all timid and stuff, and of course, just like Kevin Costner would do decades later in Waterworld, is like, no, I mean, he doesn't say this, but he's basically, obviously she doesn't want him, so he's not going to take her. And that, of course, throughout the course of their stay from that scene on at the gladiatorial school, they kind of get, have looks and, touches and lovey-dovey and whatever. I guess that makes her fall for him. So the way to get the beautiful woman when you're gonna screw her when she doesn't want to be screwed is to not screw her, and then she'll want to screw you. I guess that's the lesson of this movie. So the middle point of the movie is basically, them, him trying to recruit more and more slaves and people to basically, march on Rome or something eventually, or whatever. And also developing the lovey-dovey interest, or lovey-dovey story between him and the woman, of course. And, of course she ends up pregnant, which is so dumb, because what a horrible world they live in, and with slavery and shit, and what if you're, it's not really a world to bring a kid into. I mean, no world really is, but in particular that world, it's like, well, if your kid ended up a slave, you'd feel real good about that, I bet, wouldn't you? But she ends up pregnant, and they just keep, it's just back and forth between the Roman people and what should we do about this ever-growing threat, and we'll stomp them out, of course, and then back to, Spartacus recruiting more people. I will say the best part, I was relatively impressed by the end of the movie. I mean, towards the end of the movie, they can basically just frickin' Spartacus and at this point, towards the end of the movie, just droves and droves of just people on his side, and they trained his own trained army of, former slaves and stuff that have been freed by Spartacus and freed themselves and all this kind of stuff, and joined him for his cause. Basically, I think, cornered by a couple armies or something like that, and have to face off against one or whatever. And what I would regard, and the best part of the movie for me is I was really impressed by this scene of the kind of advancing Roman army or whatever, and just the sheer amount of people and stuff that was involved. And you really have to see the Blu-ray to probably see the detail of the frickin' like all of the people, because it's a really far shot, and what it looks like, on DVD is just like all these ants just marching, and then they separate into certain squares and combine and separate and all this stuff. That was almost worth watching the movie for, just seeing that little bit where the kind of the pre-battle where the Roman army is advancing on the Spartacus army, just kind of sitting there waiting for them to attack or whatever. Just all those extras and all those people just marching and splitting up and reforming other groups of soldiers and all this, and that was really cool. And then when they eventually start approaching the Spartacus army, like, for a while there, you think the Spartacus army is going to completely roll over them, because then they light up these big kind of, fire rolling logs of flame and stuff, and they kind of, then they have a guy on each side, pulling it to kind of pull over the Romans, and that sends all these Romans running back, for retreating for mercy or begging for mercy or whatever. And it's just, that bit was really cool, and the battle or whatever. I mean, the battle wasn't really that great or whatever. There was one really. I think there's some restored footage that probably wasn't in the original run, but there was a shot of some guy like just holding a sword, and I think Spartacus cuts his arm off, and two little jets of blood squirt out, which was really surprising to see. I think that was like probably a restored shot. I think there's like 10 minutes or something restored of this movie since its original run or whatever, but because it's got the longer the better, right? No, not really, but holy cow. So I mean, that's pretty much okay, well, let me just finish the story. So that's probably the coolest scene of the whole movie, and you gotta wait like 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 40 minutes until that happens. And I was just so surprised, because I guess it's realistic, but what ends, if I can spoil this, spoiler alert, what ends up happening with this movie is the frickin', basically in that battle, like, I don't know, if pretty much the majority of their Spartacus' grand army and women and children and stuff got slaughtered, and then the rest of the Spartacus army just got captured and slowly got crucified on their way back to Rome or something like that, and they saved like Spartacus and his buddy, of course, for the end, and kind of when they get back to Rome or whatever, they have them fight each other or whatever, and and Spartacus kills his buddy because he doesn't want him crucified, because crucifixion and just letting their tied to a cross is much more painful or crappy way to die than just being stabbed or sliced open. So Spartacus, he's just so noble, like, he doesn't screw the women, he kills his friends, he's just the noblest of a noble man possible. So in the last, one of the last scenes, he kills his friends so he can spare them the agony of being crucified, only to be crucified himself. But meanwhile, his woman and her child have been taken under I don't remember. It seems like taken under the care of the guy who originally ran the frickin' gladiator school. I think that I can't remember what her fate is supposed to be. Like, it seems like she's, the viewer is supposed to assume that she's in good hands or something. I don't know. I can't remember but it seems like we're meant to think, meant to think that the Spartacus's woman and the child will be okay or something, like maybe she'll live in some decent, I don't know, I don't remember, but I remember being surprised to see that the end of the movie is, Spartacus just being up on the cross and just like, being conscious and stuff, and his woman going up to him and just like, I don't think anyone ever, I don't think any bad guys ever actually know that Kirk Douglas is Spartacus, so, that's kind of cool because, when they were threatened earlier on, it'd be like, who's Spartacus? Like everyone would start saying it, I am, in a real tearjerker scene, and I kind of say that sarcastically and not at the same time. That was one of the cooler scenes too, when the Romans are like, okay, you better speak up or we'll start killing you, and then a lot of guys started standing up saying, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, so that was kind of cool. That was one of the cool parts of the movie too, but I was really surprised to see, I guess, like I say, it's realistic how the movie ends, where basically from what I can tell, except for maybe a few people that escaped, Spartacus's entire army was either killed, killed, and if they weren't killed in the battle, women and children, they were crucified on the way back to, one by one or whatever on the trek back to Rome. So then Spartacus is like probably the last one of these, is his army, unbeknownst to the Romans, I don't think, to be crucified, and meanwhile I guess his woman and his child are, supposed to look like they're going to be in relatively okay hands, I think. So basically this movie is, I don't know what the hell it is. It's a tale that basically says don't try to revolt because it ain't gonna happen. I mean, it's kind of like Dead Poet Society. They put this shit in movies to show you, see, I mean, it doesn't matter how big of an army you guys amass, if you try this, you're gonna lose, so it's kind of a dumb movie. I mean, it's a dumb movie even before that, but when I saw the ending, I'm like, so we watched this 3-hour and 15-minute thing about this guy trying to rise up to a tyrannical, Roman Empire, only to amass, hundreds of thousands of people and thousands of people, and just to have them all, be killed, and then that's it. Like, well, it was worth a shot, So, I mean, I understand if I'm going to get a lot of flack. If you completely, want to just try to keep your comments, if you love this movie and if it's, try to keep your comments civil. I mean, understand that everyone's got their own points of view and their own kind of genre of movies that they like and stuff. This particular genre and this era of movies, this kind of early Technicolor epic kind of movie, really doesn't do much for me, and in particular a Roman movie. So I'm only going to be able to go as high as a 1 star out of 4 stars for Spartacus, just because it's, mostly just uninteresting stuff. I mean, it's just because I'm not a fan of Roman crap, and it's just the movie, not for 1 second does this movie feel like a Stanley Kubrick movie. I think that, as I said earlier, that he was basically hired by Kirk Douglas to say action and cut pretty much. That's why this is probably one of the last Stanley Kubrick movies for me to buy, because I've always known since I tried to watch it in the 90s that basically it's a Stanley Kubrick movie that just has his name on it, kind of like AI, and it's really not a Stanley Kubrick movie, even though it's got his name on it. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review of Spartacus. As I said, please try to, go easy on me in the comments if you like this movie, and just understand that all of us have different tastes and point of views regarding all different movies and stuff. So if you got something mean to say, try to be civil, or better yet, don't say anything mean at all. So thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.